Oh, right there. Greetings, ladies and germs. Lord Crocus Squirrel here with yet another edition of Feminist Fundamentalism. Your Damsel is doomed. That's some silly things going on in the background. Sorry about that, folks. I'm just kind of stuck with it right now. All right. So, moving
Hello,
on.
everybody.
We have lovely atheist Catherine here with us. Yes, indeed. And we're going to go ahead and get Anita Hayes Grain underway. As you all know, or should have figured out by now, in the last episode, which was here about 10 days ago, we did Damsels in Distress Part 1. Today it'll be Damsels in Distress Part 2, because this is the first of 5 topics that Anita promised and then delivered on like 3 of them. Then when she said, well, I just want it done and over with, I'm going to make up a bunch more videos and just call it an afternoon. She went to the trouble of making up all new topics just so she'd have something else to talk about that wasn't the fighting fuck toy. I'm still waiting for that video, Anita. Bring it. All right. So, without further ado, let's have a look. I like this lady here. This is the very first frame and the very first second. She seems like really nifty people. But unfortunately, yeah, Anita is going to take this lady and turn her sideways and completely disempower her while we're at it. So,
Okay, now.
okay, I know the screen share wasn't showing. I turned it off for a couple. I switched it around for a minute. Are you seeing it now?
Okay. Yes.
Okay, good. All right, let me just actually click the magic button here, just to make sure. All right, and begin. Beatrice! Now, for the record, that was a man being an idiot. Not so much anything else, he was just being an idiot.
Welcome to the second episode in our multi-part series exploring the roles and representations of women in video games.
Now, please note she is wearing the same shirt she was last time.
Yeah, I noticed that.
I expect strongly this is not this wardrobe choice is based on she did all of the talking on the same friggin' day and then took almost a year to release the videos.
Yeah, same makeup, same everything.
Okay, right down to the details on her pencils, on her penciled-in eyebrows. Because her original eyebrows appear to actually be missing in action.
This project examines the tropes, plot devices, and patterns most commonly associated with women in gaming from a systemic, big-picture perspective.
Once again, you use these words, you don't know what they mean. This is a canned kind of clicky thing here, and yeah, you're welcome to the script, Anita.
Over the course of this series, I will be offering critical analysis of many popular games and characters, but please keep in mind that it's both possible and even necessary to simultaneously enjoy a piece of media while also being critical of its more problematic or pernicious aspects.
Okay, yes, you can be aware of things that are issues with a particular video game. I know this. I do this on a regular basis. Hey, Richard and Mangun, welcome aboard. Nice to have you here. Yeah, you can be critical of a thing while you enjoy it. That's easy to do. I do it myself all the time. The question becomes, are you capable of doing something else? The answer to this question of, are you personally, Anita, capable of doing something else? The answer to this, I'm assuming, is no, because you just simply you seem to have no clue what being critical and enjoying something actually even is. Also, your logic generally tends to be piss poor, and we don't know what critical is. Boom. Now. Full fun. Okay, I think that should probably silence the critics in the house here for a minute. They're actually having a little bit of a freak out because Anita's actually on their screen. Okay, so this sorts that out. Let's go on. Let's carry on.
I just want to caution viewers that as we delve into more modern games, we will be discussing examples that employ some particularly gruesome and graphic depictions of violence against women.
Okay, never mind that there are games that produce that do the same thing as far as men go, and in far greater numbers. But of course, you're only worried about women, so that's just the way it is. Yeah, go figure. It's that a trigger warning because women are going to get hurt.
Trigger warning. Yes, I took note of this.
Okay, can you?
Because of violence against women, so she must issue a trigger warning.
Richard, she's wearing a checker. She's wearing that plaid shirt because she did. We're guessing she did this on exactly this. She did this on the same day as part 1. Part 3, she's still wearing the same damn shirt. She did all of her voice recording all at one time, and then took months to release each video. She's wearing the same shirt, in fact, with the same damn wrinkles. All right. And we get the impression at this point she was actually sleeping with Macintosh at this point, around this time. Okay. Apparently she's got some other dude now.
I'll do my best to only show what is necessary, but this episode does come with a trigger warning.
Again, trigger warning, those 2 words. Just why is this even a thing? Okay, moving on.
It's also recommended that parents preview the video first before sharing with younger children.
Okay, first off, if younger children are not in position to play these games, they probably shouldn't be watching it. Excuse me. Oh, I like that. We should put a circle on that. No Anitas. Right. Okay. Moving on.
In our previous episode, we explored the history of the damsel in distress and how the trope became so pervasive in classic era games from the 80s and early 90s.
And you were completely wrong about the baseline for that.
Yeah.
Yes, trigger. Put the monitor at safe distance. Please do not watch this right up close. You might break something that will be very hard to replace.
We also explored some of the core reasons why damsel characters are so problematic as representations of women.
Disclaimer: I will not be responsible for any damaged, broken, or obliterated equipment that is generated in the or any medical problems that are necessitated by watching this video. I will not be responsible for this in any way, shape, or form.
No.
So if you break your desk, I'm not paying for it.
And if you die from all the face palms that you're gonna make watching this video, I'm not responsible.
You are also we strongly recommend your favorite bottle of paint thinner, and or a very thick oven mitt, for cushioning and or dulling of pain. And when I say paint thinner, I'm talking about some really icky alcoholic beverage that you can consume without actually killing yourself. Just try not to make a drinking game out of every time Anita decides to say something that's utterly idiotic or makes no damn sense in or out of context. Because, yeah, that's going to be a thing too. I will not be responsible for your logics. I will, however, do my best to define what her logic looks like and why it is that these things are wrong.
So if you haven't seen it yet, please check that one out before continuing to watch this one.
I don't want to. Actually, I have seen it, so I really don't have to. But you probably, if you're having a problem getting a grip on this one, don't actually watch it while on YouTube. Find some other way to get your hands on it. Then delete it with extreme prejudice.
As a trope, the damsel in distress is a plot device in which a female character is placed in a perilous situation from which she cannot escape on her own and then must be rescued by a male character.
Okay, must be rescued by a male character. Please note this, because it will be important later.
Usually providing an incentive or motivation for the protagonist's quest. Now, it might be tempting to think that the damsel in distress was just a product of its time, and that by now, surely the trope must be a thing of the past.
No, it is a very common storytelling motif, and you really need to quit. It doesn't matter. Some individual being in distress is so utterly common in the grand scheme of things. Look at that smirk. Look at that Nita smirk. That the whole legends have been written about it. Okay, it doesn't even matter who we're talking about.
It's not a trope. It's just a plot for a good story.
Okay, it's actually not a trope at all. It's a motif.
Yes.
Okay. Well, the way she puts it is that it doesn't just happen to be male. It must by necessity be male. That's the way the damsel in distress typically works. She's actually taking it a step further to misrepresent it, which makes this entire argument a fucking straw man.
Well, while we have seen a moderate increase in the number of playable female characters, the plot device hasn't gone away.
Of course, it hasn't gone away. It's been a motif for thousands of years.
In fact, the damsel in distress has seen a bit of a resurgence in recent years.
Okay.
Silence!
Okay, I want to call attention to the one that was just showing, Resident Evil 4 / Biohazard 4. In Biohazard 4, your mission is to go out and find a girl that went out on her own to go to this place and was subsequently taken. This happens to the president's daughter is entirely irrelevant as well. If it had been anybody else, probably wouldn't have happened. As a damsel in distress, she's absolutely freaking useless. She actually spends most of the game right near the protagonist. The individual in question is not combat trained. It is made perfectly clear. Therefore, she would be incapable of defending herself against a bunch of zombies.
Get me out of here.
Get out.
He's hurting me.
Alice?
Okay. Alan Wake, in fact, is a mystery story. He's looking for his wife, except that his wife is actually already dead, and he's the one that did it.
Bullet in her head.
What a dear little bird you are.
And that's...
Okay, first off, Anita wouldn't rescue you from a terrorist to save your fucking ass. And a former Marine being rescued by Anita from a terrorist by Anita wouldn't happen in any way, shape, or form. The former Marine would come save you, not Anita in any way, shape, or form. In fact, if you had a pack of Marines, they save men more often than they do women. Why? Because usually they're saving themselves and their squad mates.
Just the tip of the iceberg. Suffice it to say, the trope is alive and well even today.
Okay. You're saying that's the tip of the iceberg. Well, you're looking at the wrong damned iceberg, Anita.
Yeah.
Note, please, that almost all of those examples were from before 2009. So, and this video was in 2011. So I'm guessing she doesn't own quote unquote modern games. Even modern games for that time.
And since the majority of these titles still focus on delivering crude, unsophisticated male power fantasies, developers are largely unwilling to give up the damsel in distress as an easy default motivation for their brooding male heroes or anti-heroes.
Okay, this is actually two claims, not one. For the first claim, the thing that that these stories are for, disturbed male, crude male power fantasies, I'm going to say citation needed.
Yeah.
Okay. You don't know that that's what these are. You're jumping on this conclusion because you're cherry picking. And with your quote unquote cherry pick, with your evidence quote unquote having been thoroughly cherry picked, you're using it to drive home a point that lacks context. As far as developers being unwilling to do other things, you haven't played a few of the games that I've played of late, obviously, or anything similar that was actually out in the last 2 days. I played 4 or 5 games last night. Several of which either had strong female characters on board, for example, Magatama Earrings and Sakura Dungeon, or had no male characters at all, or any character of any kind that was even identifiable. Metamorphic comes to mind. It's a straight up puzzle game. It's almost Portal-like in the way you have to do things. You deconstruct a chunk of your especially marked chunk of your environment, use it to move around the universe. Now,
the thing with Anita that she doesn't understand, and she does it on purpose. She misrepresents historical facts and history itself, the history of Western societies as a whole, and also where other games come from. It is from Japan, and the fact that warriors were usually male.
mm-hmm.
Unless we are talking about nomadic societies in ancient times where women also fought. But it was a long, long time ago.
And usually women wouldn't because they had rather graphic situations going on.
Yeah.
Putting a pregnant woman on the battlefield is a really piss poor idea. And
yeah.
Richard, you are correct here. Devil May Cry does not take itself seriously. Most games don't.
Yes, and if it was biology that dictated that men would protect women. That it's not something that it's the infamous patriarchy, that it's the evil patriarchy and that dictates that it's happening now in video games, or there is a trope that defines that evil men are rescuing damsels in distress.
Okay.
This is he doesn't even do her research.
She would know what research is. Estelle, Richard here also brings up another point. If you want an example of the obverse, the first episode of The Legend of Heroes Trails from the Sky is perfect. Estelle Bright is a female character, a young female character no less, who not only kicks ass, she goes through all of this shit to rescue. She goes through everything that she went through to rescue her father. All of it. Everything she's done, everything she does at this point for that game is to rescue her father Cassius and take on a number of men that are being trumped up and stupid. Now, she acknowledges that there are an increasing number of female protagonists, and then she completely dismisses them and any agency they might have. And she's going to do this even more a little later on.
And she in lots of instances of this video, she makes claims without any citation. She keeps babbling on stuff that she doesn't back up.
Okay. And this gets worse. Almost every one of the games that she put forward this time were not American made. They were in fact Japanese made, as was Trails in the Sky. Very few of these were actually American done. Kane and Lynch was, if I remember correctly, but very few of the others. And Kane and Lynch is the thing we're seeing here. But the bullshit continues.
Let's go.
Remember that as a trope, the damsel in distress is a plot device used by writers, and not necessarily always just a one-dimensional character type entirely defined by victimhood.
Okay. Not entirely defined by victimhood. This means that you could be a victim, you might not be a victim, but you're still a damsel in distress. Moving on.
Now and then, damseled characters may be well-written, funny, dynamic, or likable.
I'm just trying to set you on fire through this stupid hat!
What a delightfully mean little brain you have!
However, this extra character development tends to make their eventual disempowerment all the more frustrating. Damsels on the more sassy end of the spectrum may struggle with their captors, or even attempt an escape on their own. But
This is actually. Oh no! I'm gonna let her finish.
inevitably, their efforts always prove futile.
Okay, always prove futile. Okay, this is actually a setup, a plot device setup. Not so much that they couldn't have done this. Okay, and that word "always" there is an absolute. It's not always. That is not always the case. Okay, a woman that has been attacked isn't necessarily going to have that kind of an issue. And in fact, in a lot of cases that we have even covered here, simply don't. For example, if you want to go back to another example, we have Alice from the original Phantasy Star. She sets out on a quest to avenge her brother. Okay? And she leads that party all the way through the game to finally get that revenge.
Occasionally, they may be allowed to offer the hero a last-minute helping hand, or to kick the bad guy while he's down, but these moments are largely symbolic and typically...
Okay. Largely symbolic or not, this is the lady that was kidnapped to start off the Double Dragon game, Double Dragon Neon. Okay. Please note where she is. Placed her fist in the impact area. Okay. She's actually getting her own here by punching this guy that has fallen from a great height to make a nice sound on her fist in his reproductive organs. Yes, folks, that's his codpiece. Well, Richard, you say a lot of the time Anita hovers from half right to completely wrong. Well, when you think about it, she has to be at least partially right some of the time so that it looks so that it actually looks like she's done her homework, when in fact we can prove that she has not. Okay.
Actually, she sometimes shoots her own feet.
Well, she's doing that, showing this clip anyway.
Yeah.
Because I can't think of it. I can't think of anything that would be more painful for a man. Yeah, and we have Aya Brea as well, Richard. Thank you. There's lots and lots and lots of solid female protagonists. There's lots of women that get themselves into trouble only to get themselves right back out. Okay. Okay. So moving on.
Only happen after the core adventure is over.
Okay. This Double Dragon Neon was in fact guilty of this. This is actually the very end of the game.
Or the danger has passed.
Okay. Whatever danger we're talking about, you're actually in the middle of a train wreck of your own devising here, Anita. I'm gonna let you run on because you're gonna go after the Legend of Zelda next, and that's gonna be a whole set of issues in and of itself.
These token gestures of pseudo-empowerment don't really offer any meaningful change to the core of the trope, and it feels like developers just throw these moments in the last minute to try and excuse their continued reliance on the damsel in distress.
Yeah. I wouldn't know, Art, but still. I've never had hemorrhoid surgery, but a punch to the junk is bad enough.
Periodically, game developers may attempt to build a more fleshed out relationship or emotional bond between the damsel character and the male protagonist. In the most decidedly patronizing examples, depictions of female vulnerability are used as an easy way for writers to trigger an emotional reaction in male players.
Because that actually works. It not only works for male players, it works for female players too. Because they can imagine themselves in those positions and going, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit. Okay, so this is not actually this particular bit of design that we're seeing right there from Ico doesn't even point at your point. It points in the general direction of what you're trying to say here. Okay, men and women are equally affected by this, but in different ways.
As we discussed in our first episode, when female characters are damseled, their ostensible agency is removed and they're reduced to a state of victimhood.
Except that they're not necessarily victims of anything but being kidnapped, or what the hell ever was actually done to them. And B, you just remove way more in terms of agency for every female player ever than a collection of polygons, textures, and pixels on a freaking screen. Okay, you don't get that. This is a place where you're trying to have your cake and eat it too, and it just doesn't work very well.
She doesn't understand the part of fiction, storytelling, and fantasy. She desperately needs to correlate it with reality.
And even then, when she tries to make those correlations, she infantilizes women everywhere.
Yeah.
Okay, the example from Ico that I was just talking about. Okay.
But even so, her correlation doesn't mean a causation.
No, there is no. In fact, there are studies to suggest that the opposite is true.
Exactly, but she keeps trying to make a false correlation that would be a causation, and nothing of what she says is backed by studies.
Well, and then she's the academic here, you see. She's the one with the master's degree in social and political thought. But what the hell that means is unknown to just about everybody except Anita and the silly bit that gave her the degree. I actually went and looked into her educational history. The lady that gave her the master's degree is absolutely friggin' hilarious. It's actually that the whole thing is actually incredibly questionable. So, moving on.
So, narratives that frame intimacy, love, or romance as something that blossoms from or hinges upon the disempowerment and victimization of women are extremely troubling because they tend to reinforce the widespread regressive notion that women in vulnerable, passive, or subordinate positions are somehow desirable because of their powerlessness.
That is
Oh,
not
God.
true
No.
by any stretch of the imagination. Women are people just like men are, and if you want to go down that road, how many powerless men are executed in every video game fucking ever? Okay, you victimize them by taking their lives away. Okay, having a romantic subplot in a video game is actually reflective of life, and because people have these kinds of things all the time. Unless you're trying to tell me that men and women having romantic relationships is not something that should ever happen. Okay,
No,
because
she will. Yeah, she
that's
will
the end of that
elaborate
slope.
further on that. She will elaborate further on that, and she misses the part where the man, when he goes on a quest of revenge, it's because he is hurting.
Yeah, that's an emotional statement. That is actually an emotional statement on the part of the man. Um, but at some point, we're actually going to go through Anita's master's thesis and smack that down, because the only piece of information she has, actually the only actual piece of empirical information that she gathered, actually contradicts what she has to say.
Because
So
she says of disempowerment and victimization of women. Okay, a woman died, but the story is about a man that lost someone he loved. It was the mother of his child that was kidnapped and blah blah blah. So he goes on a quest to rescue this child, avenge the death of his loved wife, and whatever. And this is not an emotionally charged situation for the man.
yeah, no, it's all about crude male power fantasy. She's already said that.
Oh, she doesn't get that.
No, I don't think she knows what to get.
Unfortunately, these types of stories also help to perpetuate the paternalistic belief that power imbalances within romantic relationships are appealing, expected, or normal.
Okay, first off, romantic relationships don't require a power imbalance on any level. I'm in a perfectly valid romantic relationship, and you know what? There's no power imbalance here. There really isn't. Okay. In fact, if there was a power imbalance, my wife is the one that's out working right now, which is why I have children in the background doing their thing. Okay. So, moving on.
Okay, so we know that the damsel in distress is alive and well in gaming.
Yes, it is, because it is a story that can easily be grasped by everyone.
But that's not the full picture. There's an even more insidious side to the story.
Oh, really? I suppose you're going to tell me what this is now.
Mm-hmm.
Over the past decade, game companies have been desperately searching for ways to stand out in a market increasingly oversaturated with very similar products.
Okay, true, but that's true of any market, regardless of circumstance.
As a consequence, we've seen a dramatic increase in the number of games attempting to cut through the clutter by being as dark and edgy as possible.
And that's the really overloaded bit.
So we've seen developers try to spice up the damsel in distress cliche by combining it with other tropes that involve victimized women.
Yay, here we go.
I've identified a few of the most common of these trope cocktails, which join together multiple regressive or negative representations of women.
There are women that are very negative. We have an example right here on screen. Okay, women are just as capable of being shitheads as men are, and your unspoken assertion of the contrary does not help your case in any way, shape, or form.
including the disposable woman, the mercy killing, and the woman in the refrigerator.
Okay, first off, the first one doesn't actually exist. The second one you made up out of whole fucking cloth. And the third one was identified by a feminist many, many moons ago and is very uncommon. In fact, we only have one really good representation of this, but you're going to try and abuse it anyway.
The term women in refrigerators was coined in the late 1990s by comic book writer Gail Simone.
This would be the example I was talking about.
To describe the trend of female comic book characters who are routinely brutalized or killed off as a plot device designed to move the male character's story arc forward.
Okay. There is a tendency, there has been a tendency throughout history to do this. This is true to a point. The idea here again is it's really just a refinement of the damsel in distress, where the damsel in question is already fucking dead. This is the revenge motive, not a
woman in the refrigerator trope.
Yeah, it's
and
actually
again misses the point.
Yeah, this is actually the setup for revenge motive, not anything else.
The trope name comes from Green Lantern issue number 54, in which the superhero returns home to find his girlfriend murdered and stuffed inside his refrigerator.
Okay, for which I seem to recall that he had a problem with the police.
This trading of female characters' lives for something meant to resemble male character development is of course part of a long media tradition, but the gruesome death of women for shock value is especially prevalent in modern gaming.
No, it's the death of people, really, because this is the last thing you're actually trying to deal with. A woman does have a little bit more shock value, because, especially for men, because that's one more woman that cannot help in the survival of the species. It's biologically based. And as such, if you want to play on the emotional states of the average male, you're going to do some damage to a female that is actually that he actually has access to, or any offspring that he may have. Okay, women do the same damn thing. That's why kids being kidnapped is a very common thing in fiction. If you don't want to drop the woman, you take one of the guy's sons or something. And usually that's enough for some guy to want to march off to fucking war. It doesn't matter if the character in question is male or female. Okay? You're using the fact that it is a woman to try and make a point that you can't actually make.
The women in refrigerator trope is used as the cornerstone of some of the most famous contemporary video games. It provides the core motivational hook behind both the Max Payne and the God of War series, for example.
Okay, fair enough.
Wife or child.
In each case, the protagonist's wife and daughter are brutally murdered, and their deaths are then used by the developers as a pretext for their inevitable bloody revenge quest.
See? You even acknowledge that it's a revenge motive. That's kind of the purpose.
But she emphasizes that the woman is dead, she's a victim, and revenge is a mere consequence. No, the revenge is the main plot of the story, of the entire story, because the guy is suffering.
Richard, I don't know. I don't know if Anita will attack the Persona games. I know they have been criticized a few times. Well, it's good to know that you guys will at least get a copy. You'll at least get Persona 5. Let's see. Moving on.
It's interesting to note that the reverse scenario, games hinging on a woman vowing revenge for her murdered boyfriend or husband, are practically non-existent.
I've already described a couple of these. Although murdered husbands are kind of rare, you do get Alice, who went out to get revenge for her brother. You do have a few others that you have in fact a number of others. If you want something that's blatantly misogynistic, I suggest you play Metro at Other M. Actually, I wouldn't even necessarily call it misogynistic because the hero is voluntarily going in for the whole bullshit here. As far as being sappy and following the male character's orders, because she's got some sort of a father complex.
The gender role reversal is so unusual that it borders on the absurd. Which is one of the reasons why the scene from Disney's Wreck-It Ralph is so humorous.
Okay, first off, it's a Disney movie. You would expect them to be humorous to some degree or another. The ones that take themselves too seriously are the ones that generally suck. All the shit that went down about Frozen, for example. Okay, the idea that someone could be hiding a fucking minigun in that tight ass mermaid skirt is just absolutely ridiculous. That's the idea. Okay, that is in fact what's going on here. That's where the humor is. She's not only hiding a minigun, but she uses it to take out the guy that just killed her. Take out the critter that just killed her groom. This is a movie, Anita. Let's get back to the fucking video games.
I could do a very long video just exploring this one trope in gaming, but today I want to look at how the woman in refrigerator is connected to the damsel in distress.
She is a variant of the damsel in distress. We already know that. We've admitted that. And I'm doing a very long video on exactly why the hell it is you are out of your goddamn mind. God, that was a bad friend to stop on and see right down your gulp.
And specifically the ways game developers have found to combine these two plot devices.
The revenge motive and a damsel and a quote-unquote damsel that can't get herself out of a jail cell. Okay.
One popular variation is to simply use both tropes in the same plotline, so as to have the male protagonist's wife stuffed in the fridge while his daughter is damseled.
Because if you really want to piss a guy off, the first thing you're going to do is kill one person and take another hostage. This not only prevents him from taking the revenge, or at least if he's horrifyingly intelligent, because he doesn't want you to kill his daughter too. It proves that you actually have the balls to do something like that, and yeah. She's going to provide a bunch of examples.
In Outlaws, your wife is brutally murdered and you then have to rescue your daughter.
10-year-old video that was more than 10 years old when you went there.
Did this.
They've taken Sarah.
In Kane and Lynch, your wife is brutally murdered and you then have to rescue your daughter.
The Kane and Lynch games sucked ass.
I'll find them all before they find Jenny.
In Prototype 2, your wife is brutally murdered and you then have to rescue your daughter.
Okay, fair enough.
In Inversion, your wife is brutally murdered and you then have to rescue your daughter.
Layla. Where is she?
In Asura's Wrath, your wife is brutally murdered and you then have to rescue your daughter.
Save her.
Okay, in a number of games this is done. It's not the only plot device ever, and that's the way you're painting it.
In Dishonored, the Empress is brutally murdered and you then have to rescue her daughter, though it's heavily implied that she's your daughter too.
Right. Yeah. It's heavily implied that she is your daughter, and she's going to join you for the next game. So, not that Anita knew that at this point, because Dishonored 2 hadn't even been announced.
Find Emily. Protect her.
It's no coincidence that the fridge plot device and the damsel plot device work in much the same way.
Because one is a variant on the other. And yes, Main Gun is one continuous baseless assertion after another. She hasn't even gotten to what her freaking point to what the point she actually wants to make is, and then when she does make it, it's completely sideways.
Actually, she doesn't understand the basic concept that, from a romantic point of view, women love a hero, and men love to be heroes. Why not?
We like the idea of being the hero. Actually, I know some women that love the idea of being the hero too.
Yeah, and men like to be a hero, and women love to be rescued by a hero. Why not? Because feminists say that this is wrong, and who asked them?
I didn't ask them. That's for damn sure. Okay. Yes, you are free to speak, Anita, but you also realize that you are subject to criticism, despite killing despite killing ratings and comments on every one of your fucking videos. Nope, actually that's a lie. She left the comments up for one of them. It was for one to launch the Kickstarter for this thing, and she got enough bullshit out of it, fucking trolls, that she played a huge victim card, and then went and everything went berserk. The only reason you even have a platform is because some people went nuts. You're not even currently all that relevant.
Both involve female characters who have been reduced to complete states of powerlessness by the narrative, one via kidnapping, the other via murder.
Okay. Yes, a murdered person is effectively powerless. I'll give you that. The other party isn't necessarily powerless, but then young people, in the form of daughters, generally are generally powerless to begin with, especially when you're dealing with somebody that's actually that's wielding an extra sword or six. Okay.
The two plot devices used together then allow developers to exploit both the revenge motivation and the good old-fashioned save the girl motivation.
The good old-fashioned save the girl motivation is based on someone that you could actually have a relationship with, other than father-daughter. With somebody upstairs knocking on their floor, probably doing a repair on their carpet.
Believe it or not, there is another more insidious version of this particular trope hybrid.
Would you guys... Okay. Would anybody kiss that face?
Which I call the damsel in the refrigerator. Now, you may be asking yourself, how can a fridged woman still be in distress? Since by definition, being fridged usually sort of requires being dead. Well, here's how it works. The damsel in the refrigerator occurs when the hero's sweetheart is brutally murdered, and her soul is then trapped or abducted by the villain.
Okay. Or in...
This is a story!
And she pulled this one completely out of her ass. She simply did a portmanteau of her two quote unquote motifs, and called that a new trope.
Now she's battling for the souls of the deaf women.
Okay. And the idea, and actually what we're getting into here is the supernatural and the religious. You can't actually do that. This has no bearing on real life because, of course, you're talking about the supernatural and the religious, and we have no evidence the supernatural even occurs. It is, by definition, supernatural, beyond natural. Okay.
But she will come back to this later.
Oh yes, and she's going to actually she makes the definition here and then expands on it later, which I find even more hilarious.
Yeah.
This oh-so-dark and edgy twist provides players with a double dose of female disempowerment and allows developers to again exploit both the revenge motivation and the saving the damsel motivation, but this time with the same woman at the same time.
Okay. Yeah, okay, this is not a new concept. This is actually a concept that itself goes back to antiquity. So it's completely inculcated into every part of Western culture. The idea of a soul and the idea of women having souls, yeah, that's been around for a long time. Orpheus in the underworld, anybody? Orpheus? Going once, going twice, sold! Or better yet, Inanna and Inky. Inanna goes to the trouble of getting herself down through the seven levels by bribing her way through various bits, and Inky has to go and save her ass. We also have the story of Izanagi and Izanami. Izanami dies in childbirth, winds up in hell, and Izanagi goes down there to save her. Except that Izanagi turns around and has to look before he was supposed to, and that pretty much covers that story there. Izanagi left. It was almost exactly the same as the Orpheus story. There are stories like this in every culture. Every one.
This trope combination can be traced back to old-school side-scrollers like Splatterhouse 2 and Ghouls and Ghosts, but the damsel in the refrigerator has definitely become a more popular trend in recent years.
Okay, whether it's trending or not, it's been part of human culture and literature and religion for thousands upon thousands of years.
In Medieval 2, your murdered girlfriend's soul is stolen and you must fight to save her.
She was already dead. That was the point behind Medieval.
In The Darkness 2, your murdered girlfriend's soul is trapped in hell and you must fight to free her.
Okay, nothing new here. Moving on.
Her soul is mine.
In Shadows of the Damned, your murdered girlfriend's soul is trapped in hell and you must fight to free her.
Again, we're still looking at Izanagi, Izanami, Enki, Inanna, and any one of a number of others.
In Dante's Inferno, your murdered wife's soul is trapped in hell and you must fight to free her.
This actually goes back to the whole idea behind Dante's Inferno, and that was actually a fairly good representation of what the actual fucking story was. They actually used the actual like book Dante's Inferno to make that video game. And again, you're still looking at a whole lot of Japanese games where the story of Izanagi and Izanami is well known. That plot device should be very common.
In Castlevania Lords of Shadow, your wife's soul is trapped on Earth and you must fight to free her.
Well, at least it's on Earth.
The damsel in the refrigerator is part of a larger trend of throwing women under the bus in increasingly gruesome ways.
As opposed to throwing hordes of men under the bus in front of a weapon sight in every shooter game ever. Okay, so keep talking, Anita. Just keep burying yourself. The only person who's been thrown under the bus here is you, and you've done it to yourself.
In an apparent attempt to interject what I'll loosely refer to as mature themes.
Mature themes. Themes where this is situations where you're going to, a mature game has either either nudity, a lot of really gory violence, or both. Mature themes. Yeah, I can imagine why you would want somebody to be mature, at least somewhat mature, before they undertake a game like this.
Developers must be hoping that by exploiting sensationalized images of brutalized women, it'll be enough to fool gamers into thinking that their games are becoming more emotionally sophisticated.
Except that that's not what's actually going on here, and that woman was dead before he stabbed her. So, moving on.
But the truth is, there's nothing mature about most of these stories, and many of them cross the line into blatant misogyny.
Blatant misogyny.
Blatant misogyny, yeah.
Okay, because Anita's message here is listen and believe. I said something, therefore it must be true. The game that she's got there, the guy with the skull in the front of his gun, that game was absolutely fucking ridiculous, and it was supposed to be. Okay, the gun itself is sentient and talks. It makes dick jokes. I mean, how much more ridiculous can you get?
Since what we're really talking about here are depictions of violence against women, it might be useful to quickly define what I mean by that term. When I say violence against women, I'm primarily referring to images of women being victimized, or when violence is linked specifically to a character's gender or sexuality.
Which you still can't prove in this particular situation. That was a kill to make a point.
Female characters who happen to be involved in violent or combat situations on relatively equal footing with their opponents are typically exempt from this category because they're not usually framed as victims.
Okay, Elizabeth is hardly a victim regardless of what you're doing. And in fact, in several cases, you actually have to, and it's in many cases, in fact, there are any number of female characters in Persona 4 Arena or Ultimax that you really need to pay attention to, or you're going to get hammered. Okay. Now, this is a fighting game. It does not make a good example of violence in any form, because it's actually ridiculous on its face. The whole concept is actually not all that brilliant. But then, I'm not a big fan of fighting games, so let's carry on.
As I mentioned in our last video, the damsel in distress doesn't always have to be accompanied by a heroic rescue.
Here I was again, with all hell breaking loose around.
Okay, you've already made that perfectly clear, Anita. You've actually not bothered to do the rest of the homework. It's just because you've been kidnapped doesn't mean anything else. It could be that she's been hurt in some way, or she's under threat of being hurt in some way. She could be dead. It does not matter. Okay. You're going to go about expanding your fridge damsel here in just a moment, and I'm going to laugh my ass off.
Me, standing over another dead girl I had been trying to protect.
Sometimes the hero fails to save the woman in question, either because he arrives too late, or because, surprise twist, she's been dead the whole time.
Yeah, this is your example. Here's your expansion. Dead the whole time. We've had that already. Medieval. Anyone? Medieval 2?
Nicole has been dead this whole time.
No. No! Helena! All my powers, and I couldn't do a thing.
Okay. This is from Hotline Miami, and I don't think that finding that particular person was the goal of that level. People in Hotline Miami, male or female, die in droves, including the player character.
Or in the case of the 2009 version of Bionic Commando, not only has your wife been dead the whole time, but turns out she's actually a part of your bionic arm.
That particular plot device was widely panned, very widely panned. Okay, people thought that was just silly, ridiculous, and obnoxious. So you using it as an example in this case does not help you case in any way, shape, or form. This was actually very thoroughly yelled about. Okay, lots of people yelled about this a whole lot. That game was panned so hard, I don't think Capcom ever recovered.
I never want you to be involved in this.
It's okay. I'll always be by your side.
And why is this a problem?
Yes, you heard that correctly. His wife is his arm.
No, his wife is the AI that controls his arm. Thank you very much, Anita. You're still doing it wrong. Go ahead, facepalm.
But the most extreme and gruesome variant of this
Nobody actually liked that thought, and even then, his wife loves him enough that she's actually okay with this. She is not disempowered in this case. She's just dead. And we're okay. And as a plot device, it's actually not horrid. It's just really friggin' contrived, and everybody hated it because of it.
trend is when developers combine the damsel in distress with the mercy killing. This usually happens when the player character must murder the woman in peril for her own good. I like to call this happy little gem the euthanized damsel.
Again, you're pulling something out of your ass. This is actually
Yeah.
supposed to create some emotional turmoil, and a lot of these cases are situations where she's either dead anyway, or is going to have some real problems if she's not.
Typically, the damsel has been mutilated or deformed in some way by the villain, and the only option left of the hero is to put her out of her misery himself. We can trace this one back to the original
Exactly.
What?
She herself says the only option to put her out of her misery is to kill her.
Yeah, and you're going to see exactly what we have in mind here in just a moment.
1980s arcade game Splatterhouse, in which your kidnapped girlfriend is possessed and the player is forced to fight and kill her.
Okay, that's not actually okay. She's turned into a huge mutant monster and then attacks you. This is not only self-defense on the part of the male, it's also that the chances of being able to turn her back after that probably pretty thin.
After saving his bitten beloved in Castlevania Lament of Innocence, the hero must then kill her to gain the power to defeat the vampire lord.
Okay, she's already going to become a vampire. By the nature of the Lamont family, he has to kill her any fucking way. Okay, never mind that the state of undeath is really not a good thing here. And she thanks him for it.
In Breath of Fire 4, Alina has been turned into a hideous monster and then begs you to kill her.
If she's asking, and you have this situation in mind, why wouldn't you? Yeah, Far Cry 2, the mercy killing of male and female characters. That's actually a thing.
She misses the point that there is such a storyline that is called mercy killing.
Yes. But according to her, this is the euthanized damsel, and she's in distress, and the only way to get her out of distress is to make her
mercy killing is disenfranchised from the damsel in distress. The mercy killing is a plot in itself.
Yes, it is. But that's not what she chose to call it. She chose to call it the euthanized damsel.
In Gears of War 2, Dom is motivated to rescue his captured wife, Maria. When he finds her, she has been starved and possibly tortured into a catatonic state, and so he shoots her.
Again, in a situation like that, a catatonic person is not going to be conducive to making things better. The chances of you being able to feed her back to health where you are is about 0. And even then, even if you could do all of these things and could spare someone to carry her, the chances of you reverting that situation are almost 0. What are you going to do? Are you going to trade your safety and those of your men for a person that is not functional and will probably never be functional? or are you going to make quick work of it because you don't have really a whole lot of other choice? Okay, there are situations where you have to make a choice, and although I don't necessarily agree that that choice was the best one, it is a choice, and it's something that actually wound up being a thing.
In Tenchu Shadow Assassins,
Do it. You must.
the princess meekly asks the hero to cut her down to get to the villain, which he does.
Well, you see, here's the problem with that. Is cutting her down to get to the villain. Well, the villain was actually a threat to her, the entire country, etc., etc., etc. One person is not above all of those other things, and if she's asking you to do it, if she's sacrificing her life in order to save everyone else, then you've just disempowered her, Anita. Yes, it's tragedy, not misogyny. Okay, the hero has to put this woman down because there is a much bigger threat overall to the universe than the universe he inhabits.
Yeah,
to
protect the universe and to get the universe rid of that huge threat. And his beloved one is already doomed. So, in order to do that, he is the one who will kill her because she actually is already dead.
Yeah, she's effectively already dead. If he could find a way to get around the back of the guy, he probably, as close as there, he probably still wouldn't be able to kill the villain without hurting her in some way, shape, or form. So where the hell are
But probably even if he went to his bed, the guy would kill her.
Exactly.
So if she's already dead.
If he backs up, she's dead.
Yeah.
If he tries to kill the guy, he's dead. She's dead. You know, that's a typical hostage situation. All you're going to do there, the best thing to do there is dare him to kill her, and then, because at that point you have every excuse in the fucking universe. Okay?
Yes.
You know, I had somebody take a hostage on me, and I told them, hey, it's not that important, dude. Okay? Just, you need to learn how to deal with your problems, but if you kill her, you give me an excuse to put you down. Do you want to spend the rest of eternity 6 feet under? Probably not. If you think you're going to survive this and I'm going to let you out that door, you got another thing coming. And lo and behold, he dropped the hostage. Whereupon he was shot dead by somebody else. Moving on.
A particularly egregious example can be found in Grand Theft Auto 3, when after you've rescued Maria Latour, it's implied that the protagonist suddenly shoots her because she's talking about stereotypically girly things.
I broke a nail and my hair is ruined. I mean, can you believe it? This one cost me $50.
Okay. First off, you have no idea who actually fired that shot. Okay, it could have been the guy in the car next to her. It could have been somebody outside the car. The game is, in fact, over at this point. There is no more game. Okay. On top of that, she's not talking about girly things. She's bitching about her nails getting broken. Okay? And her hair being a mess. Okay? She's just been rescued from all sorts of nasty shit. She should probably not, if that's the first thing she has to think of, she's shallow. She is so thoroughly shallow that she's got her own problems. Okay? But again, you don't know where that shot came from. Was the shot from the protagonist's gun? Probably not. But I have no evidence to this, and you have no evidence to this. This is not an argument. This is not an argument that you can do.
No, and she's also talking about a game that is a violent game.
Yes. Now, Maygun over here in the chat says, in the movie Jupiter Rising, the female lead is willing to sacrifice her entire family. to protect the Earth in general. And yes, I've seen that movie. He's right. Okay. The female lead, love her to pieces, but damn, there were some really strange. That was a really strange movie.
The writers deliberately wrote her character to annoy the player, so in the end, the violence against her becomes the punchline of a cheap misogynist joke.
Okay, first off, it would be a cheap misogynist joke if there weren't women like that actually fucking exist. Okay, there are women like that exist. Okay, they freak out over the most trivial things and decide that they're going to turn it into a thermonuclear war. Okay, being from the kind of that sort of quote unquote Brooklyn woman attitude, just it grates on everyone's nerves. Okay, this is a realistic depiction of a realistic female type. And yeah, the folks at Rockstar wrote her like that. I don't know that it was necessarily deliberate on their part, or if it was just something that they were doing because that was the culture of the cities that they were in. Okay, Grand Theft Auto 3 was set in a sort of pseudo New York. So, shall we try again, Miss Anita? Those women exist, and if they didn't, we wouldn't have that problem.
Sometimes these killings happen via cutscene, while other games ask the player to participate directly by pulling the trigger themselves.
Okay, first off, cutscene or pulling trigger yourself is absolutely irrelevant. Although one can make the argument it's a little more poignant if you have to do it yourself. Again, we're trying to emotionally manipulate the player here a little bit to keep playing, as opposed to just put the game down and walk away. You obviously didn't do that, so apparently it was worth something for you. Well, okay, assuming for a moment you played any of these games yourself, because as we all know, at least some of your footage was taken directly from YouTube.
In the Castlevania Dracula X Chronicles remake, if you don't rescue Richter Belmont's beloved Annette, she will turn into a vampire and you'll then have to kill her.
Oh my god, Annette. I'm so sorry I didn't save you, but you know what I do to vampires. What I have to do.
No! I'll make you mine forever!
Again, she's about ready to kill him. And that actually suggests the damsel in distress trope doesn't exactly apply here, because saving her is optional. He's in here to kill the vampires. And that's not actually a setup as a vampire. That is actually the traditional succubus. Thank you. Thank you for playing.
And she's not a damsel in distress anymore.
Obviously not. She's fully empowered as a succubus.
Yeah. Okay.
The vampires, typically in their human forms, do not have the big bat wings. That is the demon known as the succubus.
The captured women in Duke Nukem 3D beg you to kill them throughout the game.
Can you, looking at what that woman, the way that woman is right there, with the glowing red eyes, can you blame them?
This misogynist scene is regurgitated and actually made worse in the 2011 follow-up, Duke Nukem Forever.
Again, look at them. Would you want to live like that? Catherine?
No.
I wouldn't. They don't want to live this way. The best thing to do here is them not live.
Developed by Gearbox. Another popular Gearbox game, Borderlands 2, also uses this plot twist when Angel asks the player to murder her as a way to try and thwart the villain's evil plan.
Destroying the iridium injectors that keep me alive will stop the key from charging, and it will end a lifetime of servitude.
The end of a
Okay. Now, what was that here just a moment ago? She is a slave. She is already disempowered. Okay. She is a slave to the machine, and as such wants to be free. But the only way, not only that, what Nita fails to mention here is that Angel is a computer construct, not an actual flesh and blood person. Okay, so if you shut down her power, she'll die. It's actually fairly simple.
in the dark gives the player the choice between killing your girlfriend yourself.
Choose quickly, carrier. Kill her or let her live. You alone can decide.
Or letting Satan kill her by being reborn in her body.
Again, where are you going with this? Okay, either you kill her or a much worse thing happens to her. And she's already asking. So where's your problem? She's probably not going to thank you for letting Satan take over her body. And then you have to kill her anyway.
Where is Anita trying to go with that? This woman is empowered. This woman is not empowered anymore.
Okay.
The only thing to do for her is to kill her.
Yeah. Okay.
The Wii game Pandora's Tower includes one ending in which Elena begs you to kill her before she completes her transformation into a monster.
The point of Pandora's Tower is to actually turn her back the way she was. Okay, if you can't do that, then you're gonna then her end is much better than her killing you and the rest of the universe. Moving on.
Please. I beg of you.
Okay, if you ask me, this is her taking charge of her own existence and insisting that it end. Okay, she is choosing to die here. And that should be her choice. That's tragic. It's not disempowering.
Help me! I'm so afraid!
In the 2006 shooter Prey, when the hero finally reaches his abducted girlfriend, she's been hideously mutilated and fused with a monster, which you must fight while she screams for help over and over again.
Get away from me, Tommy! She wants me to kill you! I can't stop it!
After being incapacitated, she begs you to kill her.
Please, Tommy. Let me go.
And the player can't advance in the narrative until you shoot her in the face.
You don't have to shoot her in the face. You can shoot her in the chest or the stomach or whatever. The face is obviously going to be a lot quicker about doing it. That's the way.
Someone's calling you. Pick up the phone, come. Someone's calling.
We'll deal with that another time. All right. So, right back to this. I forgot to turn the ringer off. My apologies to one and all. Again, if you want to make sure you're going to do a kill, that you got a kill shot, you're going to do this in the brain pan. Period. Once the neurochemistry stops, it doesn't come back. Okay. A heart in a situation like that might actually be healed quickly. Who knows? Okay. Ultimately, the idea that you have to shoot her in the face is not only A, wrong, but B, irrelevant. This is again a straw man designed and intended by the Anita to tug on the heartstrings of every male in the neighborhood. You're doing the same thing they are, Anita, only you're really bad at it. Not that Prey was all that great a game to begin with. The new Prey is actually going to be, it looks like it might actually be better. Again, that was his choice.
These damseled women are written so as to subordinate themselves to men. They submissively accept their grisly fate and will often beg the player to perform violence on them.
Again, they are taking control of they are taking control of the one thing that they have control of, and that is their continued existence. If their existence is such that it's not going to be a happy, healthy thing, then maybe you should actually grant their request. Think about that for just a minute, folks.
giving men direct and total control over whether they live or die.
That is wrong, because
No.
because walking away from that situation takes away what little power they have left. Okay, so your argument is invalid, Anita, on its face.
Even saying thank you with their dying breath.
Because that's what they wanted you to do.
In other words, these women are asking for it, quite literally.
Yes, they are
Yes,
asking for their wishes to be respected. And now you're going to rake men over the coals, men, specifically men, over the coals for complying with a woman's request. Good job, Anita. Well done. Well played.
The euthanized damsel is the darkest and edgiest of these trope hybrids, but it's also an extension of a larger pattern in gaming narratives where male protagonists are forced to fight their own loved ones who have been possessed or brainwashed by villains.
Okay, now you're gonna do the whole thing again, except this time it's going to be women that don't actually have the capacity to think for themselves, but instead have had their minds altered. Their minds and or bodies altered.
With the supernatural.
Of course, because because toxic masculinity is a thing, right? Wrong.
When Kratos finds his mother in the PSP game God of War Ghosts of Sparta, she morphs into a hideous beast, forcing you to fight and kill her. An act for which she thanks you with her dying breath.
Finally, I am free.
Again, same thing. All you're doing is the same. It's the same run round. So moving on.
After your girlfriend is transformed into a green ogre and grabbed by the ghoulies, she chases you around trying to get a kiss.
Which would be very damaging to the player character, apparently.
Later, you must beat her unconscious before she can be returned to normal.
Hey, at least that one gets to return to normal. You know what? That's actually a score in this case.
The final boss in Shadows of the Damned turns out to be your own girlfriend.
Where's my freedom?
Who you must
this woman sounds like she's got an attitude problem anyway.
Shoot down. Similar scenarios are replicated in dozens of other titles as well.
In this case, in the case of the one beforehand, let's see, let me get. Oh no, that's right. Doing it wrong. Okay. Okay. Where'd it go? It's here a minute ago. Just a moment.
Well.
Okay, in this case here from Biohazard 5, the only thing you really have to do is destroy the crystal that she's got there, that's actually linked to her chest, and that's going to prove to be kind of difficult to knock her out and actually get it off.
Although the narratives all differ slightly, the core element remains the same. In each case, violence is used to bring these women back to their senses.
Has anybody ever had to deal with a woman that has just gone completely off the deep end, at least temporarily? Okay, you get this sort of shit with men too, actually, quite often. For example, let's go back to Fantasy Star for a moment. The character Lashiek, to be later known as Lassic, was taken over by Dark Force. You have to beat the crap out of him as Alice in order to get him back into a position to make a fucking decision, and even then you've managed to kill him. So he thanks you at the end. Okay, you're arguing straws again, Anita, and cherry picking to boot.
These stories conjure up supernatural situations in which domestic violence perpetrated by men against women who have lost control of themselves not only appears justified, but is presented as an altruistic act done for the woman's own good.
Okay, first off, you have a problem with the definition of domestic violence. Because women do this to men quite often. Not to say that it's all women versus men or that women have it coming or any of those things. But you equating this to domestic violence is not, it's way beyond the pale. You've gone.
I fail to understand. I even took note of this. How these supernatural situations encourage men to
beat their wives,
perpetrate domestic violence through an altruistic act.
Okay.
And I find this how she constructs this argument of things that cannot be absolutely correlated. We're talking about fiction. Supernatural doesn't exist. It's not a case of domestic violence because it's a story, and it's not a case of abuse. Actually, it's a case of release of someone else. Where she pulled this completely out of her ass to make a case for domestic violence in fiction where there is supernatural mixes. She drives me crazy.
She drives pretty much everybody crazy. Hopefully there are no broken keyboards from the head desking. Okay.
Of course, if you look at any of these games in isolation, you'll be able to find incidental narrative circumstances that can be used to explain away the inclusion of violence against women as a plot device.
Okay, first off, we've already established what the whole process is about, and of all of those games, only 2 of them were developed here in the United States. Okay, God of War, made in Japan. Prey, made in Japan. Shadows of the Damned, made in Japan. Grabbed by Ghoulies, that was, I believe, also made in Japan. Ninja Gaiden, Castlevania, Alone in the Dark, there's another Castlevania, Pandora's Tower, Devil Summoner. That Devil Summoner series is actually part of the Shin Megami Tensei setup, and was also, funnily enough, made in Japan. All of these games, Duke Nukem Forever and Borderlands 2, were both made here. One by 2K and the other by Gearbox. So
and no, the plot device is not violence against women.
It's not. The plot device is the same as it has been since Grecian times. A great deal of what we can of the numbers of plots that we can even come up with in the West.
It's about chivalry. It's about chivalry. It's the hero on a quest of revenge.
Realizing, of course, that our mythology, including the Bible, very much informs not only our language but the kinds of ideas we can have, and that's why some of the stuff that comes out of Japan seems so new and interesting to Americans. In fact, we wouldn't. Most Americans, or at least prior to the time the Japanese video games started anime and video games started becoming a thing, there were a number of plots that we didn't use, and the idea that the damsel in distress is as widespread as it is indicates that there may actually be some historical basis for these. Okay. Yeah, and Main Gun also makes another point here. These games are placing the players in situations where they must perform acts that go against the protective instincts, things that we're going to really not like ourselves for. And you're not reinforcing violence against women, you're going against the instincts, you're going against your own instincts, which Anita seems to be incapable of doing.
Actually, they are reacting against an act of violence that was perpetrated against their women, but it was an act perpetrated by a villain, and they are the heroes that go on a quest for rescuing their daughters, or in the case of the supernatural, to get, to save to do the mercy killing, to rescue the soul, or whatever.
Okay.
She
But no,
misses the point entirely.
note that she has 12 games here out of more than 100,000 games on the market. She has selected 12, and it's 12 of those that that most closely come to her, that most closely support her point, except that her point is still completely unsupported.
But not even the games that she selected support her point.
Yeah, or at least they don't do it well. Grab by Goalies, the example she used there was just completely out in left field. Okay, yeah, you gotta beat up your girlfriend has been turned into an ogre, but you know what? You gotta knock her unconscious to turn her back. And as far as I'm concerned, that's actually a net win for everybody. Yeah, okay, you got to do something that goes against protective instinct, but you have a higher purpose behind doing this, and that you can actually get her back the way she was. And okay, fine by me, unless unlike some of the others, like the thing she came up with for Duke Nukem Forever or Ninja Gaiden 3, in which there is no other alternative. You either do it, or these people continue to suffer or get killed anyway. So guess what? You're out of your damn mind.
But just because a particular event might make sense within the internal logic of a fictional narrative,
which you must actually take into account when you're doing this. If you were doing this without a narrative purpose of some sort, then it'd be completely wrong. Okay? And in Duke Nukem Forever, you don't actually have to shoot those girls. You don't. If I remember that scene correctly, you don't actually have to do it. It's not a thing. You can choose to avoid, and actually there's a video later in the series in which she goes out of her way to do a thing just to make a point.
that doesn't in and of itself justify its use. Games don't exist in a vacuum, and therefore can't be divorced from the larger cultural context of the real world.
Because that cultural context informs the games, not the other way around.
It's especially troubling in light of the serious, real-life epidemic of violence against women facing the female population on this planet.
Citation needed.
Yes.
Okay. The studies that have been done about violent video games and misogyny in video games seem to generally tend to indicate that this is actually the reverse. And in fact, if you look at the crime statistics over the last about 35, 40 years, about 35 years, over the course of my lifetime, since video games became a thing, the violent crime rate has gone down sharply. Very sharply. It's actually been on a downward trend. Rape and murder both have been on a surprisingly large downward trend since video games in the home became a thing. Okay, and that's from the Federal Bureau of Investigation, which admittedly only deals with the United States, but other countries are seeing very similar things. The prevalence of three things in the universe have tended to bring down the rates of some types of crime. Those being video games, porn, and certain types of violent film. Okay, those things getting out there and into the mainstream and actually being a thing, despite what you think, are actually providing a net societal benefit. Even if one or two people take these things entirely too seriously and go to shoot up a school, the overall trend is sharply down. You take away the video games, and I'd be willing to bet in very short order, crime rates would go back up to the way they were before. I mean, what would you
No,
rather?
and the funniest thing is the crusade against porn is that they completely do not understand that for many, many men, the only outlet is porn. If they take away this outlet, the rate will increase.
Dramatically. Okay, porn became an actual thing back in the 1970s. The ability to take it home with you became a thing in the 1980s. Between 1973 and 1985, the rape stats went down a bit. After 1985 or so, when the VCR became affordable enough to enter into the average American household, the rape rates declined dramatically, and they keep going down.
And now they are trying to regulate porn on the internet when failing to understand that this is actually a good thing, and because they are exploiting the angle of the women that are exploited in the porn industry. When they fail, they don't see the forest for the trees. First of all, there is a contract. There is a small minority of the fringe industry that is not actually companies doing that.
Right. And you also have,
so when there is a contract signed, there is the consent of people that are actually doing this for business.
Yes, and
so
the porn industry in general is
the
legal. Porn industry,
it's
at least the
legal,
mainstream porn industry, is entirely consent based. If a woman
try to regulate, and if you try to regulate the internet access straight from the provider, this is catastrophic, because then they will have that rape epidemic that they are bitching and whining about.
Well, and then there's more to it than that. Not only is the porn industry essentially consent based, either the woman or the man in porn can say, "I'm not working with that person," and that person is gone. Gone. They aren't going to do that scene. At the very least, they're not going to do that scene, and they might actually be shoved off the entire movie, the entire film, because this person doesn't want to work with that person. Okay?
Yes.
This is something that I've gotten from a number of porn stars, all of which are doing this because they want to. Now, as far as getting back to video games, there have been any number of studies, and I found several of them when I did a research paper on this years and years ago. I did a research paper on this back in the early 2000s for a teacher that was very anti-video game. And I put my argument together in such a way that she says, "Okay, maybe it's not as bad as I think. I'll go look at it and see what comes up." She's a gamer now. I see her every once in a while on the occasional online game.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The actual statistics don't bear out this argument that she's making. Okay, it's not violence against women or even violence in general. Okay, Jack Thompson tried to make this argument, and he failed miserably in several courts of law. Miserably. There is no correlation beyond the first 20 or 30 minutes that there is an increase in aggression based on violent video games for those who are generally psychologically stable. If you are not psychologically stable, you have an entirely different set of problems. Okay, you spent 3 million hours on Call of Duty Black Ops, then already you've got an issue. But at the end of the day, unless you're psychologically imbalanced in some way and are starting to think of Call of Duty Black Ops as real, Call of Duty Black Ops is not going to be the reason you go in to an elementary school and kill 15 people. It's not. Very simple. Okay, now let's move on.
Every 9 seconds, a woman is assaulted or beaten in the United States.
Citation needed. You don't
Citation needed.
Citation desperately needed here. Okay, because you've got to realize that for every woman that is assaulted, 2 men are. Okay, men are more commonly assaulted by men or women at twice the rate that women are. Okay, so moving on.
And on average, more than 3 women are murdered by their boyfriends, husbands, or ex-partners every single day.
Okay.
Again.
3 women. You don't give us any context for that number. You just pulled it right out of nowhere. Okay, which 3 women are we talking about? And where are they?
Where's the...
Okay,
She said that there are several studies. Where are the studies? Where's the link? Name the people who did this research, the studies.
Okay, she's pulling statistics out of freaking nowhere and is expecting us to go and look them up. We're not going to do that. If you were the one making the claim, you need to do the proving. You need to bring your citations with you. Do your fucking homework.
Research consistently shows that people of all genders tend to buy into the myth that women are the ones to blame for the violence men perpetrate against them.
Okay, again, you specify research, but you don't say who did that research, what research you're on about, or whether or not there's a thing going on here that you're just not telling us.
If she's making this claim, outrageous as it is, she should have said whoever made a study at that university, and this study says that. That's how you make a claim, Anita.
Yes, because a claim that is presented without evidence can be dismissed without evidence. It's Hitchens' razor. Your claim is dismissed because you didn't provide any evidence. You said research, and while that's generally good for the average person that doesn't stop to think, for a skeptic or a critic, that's just gonna raise a mile's worth of red flags. Moving on.
In the same vein, abusive men consistently state that their female targets deserved it, wanted it, or were asking for it.
I still need a citation for this. Has anyone seen that? I don't. Yeah. Yes, you do have some idiots that will say shit like that. The problem, of course, is that you don't. That you're talking about the majority, and not a small vocal group of idiots. Those are the ones you hear about in the news. The guy down the street smacked his wife because she came after him with a fucking knife. You're not going to hear about that. Why? Because the man was actually the victim was the expected victim in this case, and it wouldn't do to have your narrative get disrupted.
Given the reality of that larger cultural context, it should go without saying that it's dangerously irresponsible to be creating games in which players are encouraged and even required to perform violence against women in order to save them.
Okay. Now, you suggested it's irresponsible, dangerous to do this. I say they're people, and as such, what message are you sending when you put one guy with a gun in a battlefield full of other men and say, "Go get him, Tiger"? Because you have to kill all of these people, all of these creatures, all of which had mothers and fathers and sisters and brothers, in order to meet whatever objective is there. We're talking about a game, Anita. These things are a fantasy, and as such, you're just you're making a point that can't be made.
Even though most of the games that we're talking about don't explicitly condone violence against women, nevertheless they trivialize and exploit female suffering as a way to ratchet up the emotional or sexual stakes for the player.
Okay, first off, killing your girlfriend is not sexual. Okay, killing your girlfriend is the absolute opposite of sexual. Because if you did that, you're going to get a rep for this shit, and no girl will ever touch you again. Okay, emotional, yeah, something like that would actually be very emotional, especially if you've got someone if you're having to do something like that for somebody that you're really attached to. Okay, I don't know if I could make that choice, really, not in the real world.
Imagine you come back home and find your wife bleeding to death and your children gone. How would you react, Kage?
If we're being honest, I'm not sure how I would react. There is a very large part of me that would call an ambulance and then leave. Because whoever it is that took my children is going the fuck down. Period. Okay? If I had some indication that the individuals in question were local and thus not beyond the long arm of the law, I might actually let the police deal with it, give them as much information as I can, and hope like hell that I'm not the one getting arrested because my wife is bleeding out. Okay? Because I'm going to be the first suspect. There is no question in this. Okay, I am the first suspect. I don't care who the hell the cop is. I will 100% be the first suspect. And they're going to waste a bunch of time questioning me when I don't have the foggiest idea what the fuck went on or why it might have gone on. All I know is who I have for enemies and who might actually be able to help me fix the problems. But then I'm not the average male either. I have more contacts than most, and I have the ability to do some of these things. Not that I necessarily would or could if given the circumstances. If I'm in a jail cell, obviously I'm not going to get very far.
Anita fails to understand the difference between reality and fantasy.
And that is actually far more problematic than anything she's shown here. Moving on, we've actually got a little less than 5 minutes left on this thing. So,
yeah.
Despite these troubling implications, game creators aren't necessarily all sitting around twirling their nefarious-looking mustaches while consciously trying to figure out how to best misrepresent women as part of some grand conspiracy. Most probably just haven't given much thought to the underlying messages their games are sending.
Okay, first off, you have to prove that there's an underlying message, and you completely failed to do that. Okay, the use of common motifs in literature, and this one being exceedingly common in literature, is not a subliminal attempt to tell people that this is what they must go do now. Okay. In fact, 90% of the time, most won't. More than that. I'm probably one person that could find a way to make a revenge motive work. Now, that being said, you're still not anywhere near. You're trying to connect the dots here in a way that has been so thoroughly cherry-picked that you've already shot your argument in the foot. But I'll let you.
And she's again using that 1913 movie.
Mm-hmm.
And in many cases, developers have backed themselves into a corner with their own game mechanics. When violence is the primary gameplay mechanic, and therefore the primary way that the player engages with the game world, it severely limits the options for problem solving.
This is completely untrue, as can be noted by just about every RPG ever fucking made. Okay, putting a puzzle into an RPG is easy in the extreme. Okay, I can do it. I could do something like that in my fucking sleep. And I have done that. Although not necessarily asleep. Okay, putting in a romantic subplot. That's easy to do. putting in all kinds of, there's all kinds of things that you could do with even with an RPG or a sandbox game or any one of 100 other types where violence is your primary game mechanic without actually resorting to what you're about to say.
The player is then forced to use violence to deal with almost all situations because it's the only meaningful mechanic available.
Again, not necessarily true. There are games like that, but again, it's not true by necessity, as can be proven in a number of games that I actually have on hand, some of which I've actually played for you folks on Squirrel Play Live recently. Yeah, that research he's citing is double top secret ultra purple.
Even if that means beating up or killing the women they're meant to love or care about.
Yeah, right. Okay.
One of the really insidious things about systemic and institutional sexism is that most often regressive attitudes and harmful gender stereotypes are maintained and perpetuated unintentionally.
Okay. Even if they had done it by intent, you're still not getting the big picture here, Anita, despite the fact that that's what you said you're doing. The big picture is that you have a set number of concepts that are inculcated so deeply into culture to begin with that everyone will understand certain types of plots. Okay, a murder mystery. Some guy is murdered and a woman is called in to solve the murder. Okay, that plot is going to work out the same way regardless of whether there's a man or a woman doing the investigating or a man or a woman was killed. We have the damsel in distress, which I can still gender swap, and it's not, and it doesn't even remotely become an issue.
And okay. how many crime plots we have where the person who is investigating becomes a target himself or herself?
Quite a few, actually. There are quite a number of them.
It's a very common plot.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and it's actually part of the murder mystery formula.
Yeah.
Okay. You're getting too close. You need to go.
Yes, you're getting too close, and you become a target.
You become a liability and thereby a target. Yeah. So, if you need to go back and do some study of literature, Anita, because that's where it all comes from, and and the largest part of the Western world is informed as much by the Bible as anything else. Our language is delineated by the King James Bible. Okay, it's the first tome in which you can actually provide a narrative of any kind, and all of the major plot types that we actually have are present therein, which is why plot patterns didn't work. If you could find some way to link that back, to link any plot that I could come up with back to a Bible, then you're automatically out. Some variant there too. If I could find some way to, never mind. I don't even know where I was going with that. Okay.
No.
If you want the source of the stereotype,
she is completely illiterate. She has no. She knows nothing about literature.
Yeah, it doesn't make her illiterate. It does, however, make her unread, and unread is actually 10 times worse. She can't be illiterate, or she wouldn't have the grasp of command language that she does, and that she uses against people on a regular basis. So that's kind of where I'm at with that.
Okay, I
likewise
engaging.
What?
I used the wrong word.
Okay, no, that's fine. It happens every once in a while. Nobody is completely immune from using an incorrect word, including myself. I'm just quick to correct it if I or someone else does. Let's go on. Let's carry on here.
With these games is not going to magically transform players into raging sexists. We typically don't have a monkey see, monkey do direct cause and effect relationship with the media we consume.
Then why are you even making that argument, Anita?
Cultural influence works in much more subtle and complicated ways. However, media narratives do have a powerful cultivation effect, helping to shape cultural attitudes and opinions.
Okay, helping to shape cultural attitudes and opinions. This is why we have men in sitcoms looking like idiots, being repeatedly saved or instructed by their long-suffering wives. George Costanza, anyone, or Tim Taylor, or whatever the character's name is on the Jeff Foxworthy show that is played by comedian Jeff Foxworthy. These people look like these men look like fucking idiots, doing things that every other human being on the face of the fucking planet knows he ought not. And you're going to give that a pass in favor of this.
So when developers exploit sensationalized images of brutalized, mutilated, and victimized women over and over and over again, it tends to reinforce the dominant gender paradigm, which casts men as aggressive and commanding, and frames women as subordinate and dependent.
Again, if you want to know where that attitude came from, look into our prehistory, Anita. Really. Women did, at that point, you had some women that would hunt. You would have the majority of women, however, that would stay home and protect children rather than go out with the men and hunt down things or go to war. Because ultimately, a man is capable of providing as many offspring as he can find an outlet for, whereas a woman is restricted to just the children that she herself can bear before she either gets too old or expires. Okay, baby boys are approximately 51% of the birth rate today. They are probably about 2/3 of the conception rate, and you are still out your damn mind. Okay, men are more common in there are a larger number of men than there are women. Violence against a woman tends to result in a reduced capacity for continued survival of a species, nation, tribe, or family. A man, on the other hand, can be killed and replaced. Because it's a hell of a lot.
She has no concept of how the modern society was formed.
No, she has no concept of how modern society was formed. She has no sense of history, and without a sense of earlier history, she winds up with way more problems than she has answers.
Yeah.
Okay.
And how biology and gender played into that, and
right.
how she wants to redefine gender in this entire historical scenario.
Okay, but also note that women do not have the upper body strength of men. They usually have more lower body strength. Okay, men have the upper body strength and lack somewhat down below. Now, Main Gun here says, again, she fails to show that this is actually the case and how it's bad. She's making baseless assertions, and I have no choice but to agree. I have seen no evidence except a bunch of images that are cherry-picked out of video games, usually in cutscenes.
Although these stories use female trauma as the catalyst to set the plot elements in motion, these are not stories about women. Nor are they concerned with the struggles of women navigating the mental, emotional, and physical ramifications of violence.
Okay. She wants us to, okay, in which case the way to make a happy Anita would be to have a woman that is brutalized and then takes up and goes after her own revenge, either before or after her inevitable death. Okay. If you don't have a woman that is going to do this, why shouldn't a man do it? If she's not going to, if she's dead, she can't very well deal with her own trauma, can she? Okay, let's go ahead and let her do her cut.
Instead, these are strictly male-centered stories, in which, more often than not, the tragic damsels are just empty shells, whose deaths are depicted as far more meaningful than their lives.
Okay, if their deaths, if their lives weren't somehow meaningful, we wouldn't have a story to begin with. Okay,
Yes.
even if that meaning was only really evident to the person trying to rescue them / avenge them / what the hell ever, you still have the situation in which these women have their lives had a meaning. They existed. They were
They
there.
existed.
They had enough. They had enough meaning to them for them to have an effect on the player character, and therefore to at least some degree the player, and that does make their deaths, whether required or not, much more meaningful. So you've just been argued completely out of your case.
Generally, they're completely defined by their purity, innocence, kindness, beauty, or sensuality.
Okay. First off, I can't think of any reason of any case in which this is entirely true. Okay. There are some women that are defined initially based on sensuality. Jessica Rabbit comes to mind, but then Jessica herself has her own little toolbox, and being a sensual creature does in fact come with tools of its own. For example, it gives you the tool. It gives a woman like that the tools to get some tool to come out and save her.
In short, they're just symbols meant to invoke the essence of an artificial feminine ideal. In fact, these games usually frame the loss of the woman as something that has been unjustly taken from the male hero.
Okay, first off, depriving someone of their freedom means that you have people that like them, love them, etc., that are going to want to make sure that that situation doesn't continue.
So now, I take from you.
Okay, that's a bad attitude on the part of the guy here with the blood on his face.
It's not your fault.
The implication being that she belonged to him, that she was his possession.
Again, that's a failing on the part of the individual character that made that fucking statement. And there was a time in which that attitude was actually valid. Okay? The first thing you do when you conquer an area is you take the women and the children that might be used as either soldiery or breeding material. That's the first thing. And you kill all the men that could actually fight you. That's a thing. That was a thing in antiquity, and it's still a thing in some places now.
Once wronged, the hero must go get his possessions back, or at least exact a heavy price for their loss.
Okay, again, yeah, you're treading the same territory, and that's not actually a modern attitude to have. Okay, even if it were a modern attitude to have, you would still not wind up in the same position as you would have 5,000 years ago when that was actually a thing, or even as few as 500 years ago.
On the surface, victimized women are framed as the reason for the hero's torment. But if we dig a little deeper into the subtext, I'd argue that the true source of the pain stems from feelings of weakness and/or guilt over his failure to perform his socially prescribed patriarchal duty to protect his women and children.
Okay, first off, that's not socially prescribed, it's biologically prescribed. And those that violate that biology are generally considered unbalanced and mentally ill. If you have a man that says that has his entire family wiped out and says, fuck it, most people are going to think of him as a goddamn sociopath. And you're still wrong. You were
She
so
doesn't get she doesn't get the ramifications of such a tragedy happening because she focuses on the fact that a woman was violently murdered.
Yeah.
She
Okay.
ignores the feelings of the man involved in the situation.
Okay. There are some people that there are some people to which the loss of a woman would pay the loss of the female that they are closest to would be less damaging than me keying their car. But ultimately, these people are the exception, not the rule. What they're doing here
Yes,
is they're playing on on our biological urges, not trying to turn us all into little sociopaths. So
yes. We don't live in a society that is overwhelmingly that has an overwhelming majority of sociopaths.
okay.
So the normal reaction is grief.
Yes, and grief can be a powerful motivator. And yeah, that was the bad guy's attitude. He's the bad
Yeah,
guy, therefore he's supposed to have a bad attitude. Fucking,
yeah,
he's a goddamn psychopath.
yeah.
So yeah, you, we see where we're going with this. Yes. All right, moving
Mhm.
on.
And I hated myself for allowing this to happen to her and our little girl.
Okay. Yeah, most men will. Most men with a brain in their head will, and if they don't, then their wives' mothers or some other person would make every attempt to set them straight, and the police would probably try you for murder.
In this way, these failed hero stories are really about the perceived loss of masculinity and then the quest to regain that masculinity.
It's not about masculinity. It's about actually having fucking emotional states. We do have them, Anita. We know how emotions work. We don't necessarily understand your emotional state, but we do know how these things function and why they do and why they function the way they do.
Primarily by exerting dominance and control through the performance of violence on others.
Again,
Yeah, yeah. I quoted this. She said, "Loss of masculinity and regain of masculinity primarily by exerting dominance and control through the performance of violence on others." So basically, she reduces man to some dominant and domineering and controlling entities that are only capable of performing violence to regain their masculinity when they feel that they lost it.
yeah. She reduces men to automatons and infantilizes the women. Yeah, vengeance is apparently completely masculine.
So actually, it would be within this scenario that she paints of the damsel in distress. It's quite the accurate opposite because she lives in a fantasy land where women are damsels in distress and needs the safe spaces and all the trigger warnings and all this bullshit. And men are some kind of brutal, I don't know, animals that need to perform violence. I don't understand what is her idea of her opposite gender. I don't understand. Maybe that is why she's so clueless about what is going on in all the tropes. No, sorry, Anita, it's not tropes. It's plots. It's storylines. It's genres.
Motifs.
It's about literature, it's about history, it's about context.
And she has actually stripped these of any and all context.
Yeah.
Consequently, violent revenge-based narratives repeated ad nauseum can also be harmful to men because they help to further limit the possible responses men are allowed to have when faced with death or tragedy.
Again, assuming that any man is actually willing to buy into this, and most men that I've ever met don't. Okay, now this being said, she goes after she's going after the toxic masculinity thing without actually saying those words, and violence is not always the answer. It is an answer. It's a solid answer that will solve the problem, but it's not always the answer. And the idea that they limit men to violence is absolutely ridiculous. Because the pen, as has been the word, as has been the phrase for hundreds of years, the pen is mightier than the sword. Diplomacy is always the first avenue when you have large scale when you have large scale disagreements.
That's how we created the justice system, to have a third party settling disagreements or anything that happens, or even like things like murder or any other things.
Okay.
A third party mediating.
She's gone out of her way to find to find what she thinks of as the most egregious examples, but she fails to have any kind of contact. She just takes them at face value.
Yes.
In fact, the idea of someone having to kill someone else in order to save them is not a new concept.
No.
For example, I'm going to point to a Disney movie from long ago. It's called Old Yeller. Okay, brilliant dog. Everybody loved the dog. The dog had to be put down. Why? Because it was rabid. It was going to be dead anyway, and putting it out of its misery is the best. It was the best thing for it. Okay. Anyway, moving on. There's not a whole lot left here, so.
This is unfortunate because interactive media has the potential to be a brilliant medium for people of all genders to explore difficult or painful subjects. So to be clear here, the problem is not the fact that female characters die or suffer. Death touches all of our lives eventually, and as such, it's often an integral part of dramatic storytelling.
Which means you just shot your entire argument right out the fucking window.
Exactly.
Your entire argument just went away.
To say that women could never die in stories would be absurd. But it's important to consider the ways that women's deaths are framed and examine how and why they're written.
Okay. Again, you just referred to your entire fucking argument as absurd. You've been arguing this entire time, to try and convince us that women dying is bad, and then you push this narrative right back out the door, calling it absurd.
And she said that it's a dramatic
There are some games that try
situation.
to explore loss, death, and grief in more genuine or authentic ways that do not sensationalize or exploit victimized women.
Okay, Dear Esther is a walking simulator. It is entirely non-violent. Okay, the only way you can die is to fucking drown yourself or throw yourself off the top of the tower at the end of the game. And you have just completely infantilized everyone. Dear Esther was not so much a game as a walk through a chunk of countryside with a goal in mind and a little bit of maze puzzle, with the expectation that you're going to feel so guilty about it that you commit fucking suicide. Okay, this guy doesn't. He's not even. That's probably the most realistic example you've even got here, because men commit suicide at far greater rates than women.
Dear Esther, Passage, and To the Moon are a few indie games that investigate these themes in creative, innovative, and sometimes beautiful ways.
Okay, next up, the person in that bed is actually a man who is quite old and going to die anyway. That's just the way that works. I don't know anything about Passage. I have to go back and look. I'd actually have to find the game somewhere and actually have a look at it. To the Moon is actually a whole different ball of wax. The death happens at the very beginning of the game, and your mission, of course, is to imagine your way to the fucking moon. Also, if I remember correctly, the game is also entirely non-violent.
These more contemplative style games are a hopeful sign, but they're still largely the exception to the rule.
And there's a reason for that, because contemplative games like that tend to not have the sort of impact on a player that a game with gunfire or some other form of, beat the monster to the freaking floor. They're not a challenge to overcome, which is actually been the point of games since games were a thing.
A sizable chunk of the industry is still unfortunately trapped in the established pattern of building game narratives on the backs of brutalized female bodies.
It's not people, Anita, people. Because there are men in these that get done this way just as often. Okay? And you're right back to Dishonored. That forgive what I'm about to do here, but that's entirely dishonorable of you. You've already tried and failed to make your point with Dishonored, and now you're going to show this for effect. It's at very minimum intellectually dishonest, and it's very much dishonorable.
Violence against women is a serious global epidemic.
Okay, a global epidemic. The problem, of course, is that violence is a global epidemic, just like
but not violence against women. Violence is a global epidemic.
Okay, violence, period. For as long as there have been humans, there have been violence between people going back into antiquity. We have killed more people in the last 100 years than we did in the previous 5,000. Okay? World War I and World War II took more lives than all of those other conflicts combined. Okay? Who did the dying? Men. Start thinking about it. Violence is a thing. It will be a thing for as long as we have the capacity for it. If you teach people to stop the hate, then you will teach that. Then people will stop killing each other. Okay. There have been more people killed in attacks by ISIS over the last 5 years than have been killed in Iraq overall. Okay, so why don't we try that again?
Therefore, attempts to address the issue in fictional contexts demands a considerable degree of respect, subtlety, and nuance.
None of which you have. All you've been doing is dropping anvils and trying to bludgeon us with them. Okay, the idea here is you think your entire concept is you think that violent video games have a direct correlation to violence against women. This is not true. Many studies, several of which can be found in a very short Google search, will give you that right off the top.
Women shouldn't be mere disposable objects or symbolic pawns in stories about men.
Nope, men should be disposable in their entirety. That is what you're arguing.
And their own struggles with patriarchal expectations and inadequacies.
Okay, first off, none of these men is necessarily inadequate. There are things that men that are done by people, not necessarily men, but women too, that are beyond the control of a particular man, and having to deal with the aftermath is a defining issue for any man or woman, for that matter. This is a people issue, not a gendered one. You're making this about, oh, the poor women, they've been so horribly brutalized. What happened to all the men that Nathan Drake has shot over 4 games?
Yeah.
What happened to the women and children that they were supporting? Where's their justice? Let's think about that for 3 seconds. Okay? How about all the men that Lara Croft has killed in the amount of, in how, I don't even know how many Tomb Raider games. It's at least 10. Okay?
Oh, but they were bad guys.
But they were bad guys. You know what? It doesn't matter.
Bad guys.
People were still people.
They were bad guys.
If we want to take Anita's narrative to its logical conclusion, these were still people. And they were shot dead by some woman that came through with two handguns and a bad attitude trying to rob the place they were protecting. Okay. Hey, Sam. Yeah, she is as stupid as the feminists wanting to be paid the same as men. Unfortunately, really, if you're you can be paid the same thing for the same work, plus or minus whatever performance bonuses, and you're still going to be bitching because not all of the women are making as much money as the men's, because women tend towards part-time jobs in lower paying fields than men do, because men are expected to provide bread and shelter and all that other shit, whereas women are expected to provide primarily for their own aesthetic and other similar needs. Okay? Creature comforts. And yes, Lara Croft does count. And she counts not because she wears short shorts in the bulk of the games, but because they managed to make her fully dressed for the last two. She still counts. And she would count even if she was wearing short shorts. She is slaughtering men by the 100 count.
The dark and edgy trope cocktails that we've discussed in this episode are not isolated incidents or obscure anomalies. Instead, they represent an ongoing, recurring pattern in modern gaming narratives. In most cases, the Damsel characters have simply gone from being helpless to being dead, which is obviously not a huge improvement from her perspective.
No, it wouldn't be a huge improvement from her perspective unless you're talking about what you refer to as the euthanized damsel. In which case, it's a gargantuan improvement, because not only was she empowered to ask somebody to save her own life, her wishes were respected.
I know this episode has been a little bit grim, but please join me next time for the third and final installment covering the damsel in distress, where we'll take a look at some titles that attempt to flip the script on the damsel, and then we'll go on a quest to find examples of the elusive dude in distress role reversal.
Okay, now, just for the amusement factor here, this is the end of part 2, obviously. She's going to go looking for examples of the dude in distress, and I'm pretty sure I can find a few dudes in the fridge, at the very least. But again, even if he's trying to rescue a damsel, what dude isn't in fucking distress? What dude is not in distress? What dude is not in danger when trying to complete a damsel in distress role? Okay. In what circumstance do you actually have a situation where you can actually make the whole thing work? Okay. Should I kidnap Master Chief and have Cortana save him? Probably not. Okay. Did Cortana actually do such a thing? Yes, she did in the opening of Halo 4. She did exactly that by waking him up so that he could go on and try and make the situation a little better. Okay, you're going to go through and do a whole bunch of stuff here about Cortana in another video much later, but that's not going to. But that's a topic for another day. End of the day, you have failed to make your point, and I've still spent 10 minutes. We've still been here more than 2.5 hours trying to get your 20-minute video or 25-minute video actually broken down and unpacked. Okay.
Yeah.
And here's where the issues actually are. Number one, you have no concept of history or literature, or why biology might suggest that men do some of the things that you say they're not supposed to do. Okay? You've completely disregarded that men have emotional states, or that males should have emotional states that they need to deal with, or that any given method for dealing with a problem should be undertaken above and beyond any other. You don't give any alternatives. You simply you use a walking simulator and an RPG, actually two RPGs. I'm pretty sure Passage is an RPG, to try and make a case that you failed to make in the first place. That's not the opposite side of the coin. What you needed to have done, Anita, is to have found some women in these roles and try and disprove the idea that they're doing the same things and for roughly the same reasons. Okay. And in fact, we can prove to a large degree that in the cases where you have a man that's been killed or a woman that's trying to deal with a loss, you're trying to deal with a situation where you need to, or where they do actually go out and they take revenge. Or in an example from a not great game, you have a woman that is protecting a small child, and if she gets too far away, she's dead. Or if she gets too far away for too long from this child, she's dead. She gets sick and she fucking dies. But that's not going to be an example for you, because not only is she not in distress, she's protecting a girl that is in distress, and therefore that can have a very negative effect on her. So how about we go with you're not going to find what you're looking for because you're not actually going to go look for it. Finding a case of a man in distress is not going to be as common as women, but there are situations where that is the case. Okay, so with that, I think we're going to go with the wandering off now, because again, we've been at this a little longer than I'd really planned on. There was a lot to be said. You had some final words there, Catherine?
Yeah, I think that I said what I wanted to say in my comments, but basically it's the thing that she misses the concepts of literature, of narrative, of genre, and also she fails to realize that this is a fantasy. And when you are telling a story, you have several tools to tell a story. And you are also, in the game, you are selling a product. And you sell what your customers want to buy. That's the basic thing.
The thing is they're not actually, most of these people aren't buying the narrative, they're buying the violence. Okay, and they're taking out their violent urges, which are a biological construct, by the way.
And so she's taking issue with something that is a non-issue. That's the problem with feminism, with social justice warriors. They create issues where none exist.
Yeah.
And so this is not about a damsel in distress. This is not about violence against women. This is she's creating a false correlation to try to create a causation that cannot be possibly created.
Yeah.
Doesn't exist.
Correlation does not infer causation. Correlation is not causation.
There is no correlation and cannot possibly be a causation.
Right.
Actually, it works the opposite way. Our culture, and the Japanese culture work in a way that these games are produced because the stories are told by the cultures that dictate this, because of historical concepts that dictate the ingrained unconscious that creates these storylines. That's it.
Yep.
If she does not educate herself in literature and history and even in biology, she will never get this point.
Well, she actually put together a rather large audience with this. If you find a correlation, then you might want to go looking for causation, but correlation is not causation. There may be causation, and it may actually just be coincidence, which I do find happens a lot of the time. Or what you're looking at may in fact be an outlier, like you would find in any school, like you would find in the vast majority of school shootings, where the perpetrator was a massive gamer. These people are generally unbalanced and are, as a result, outliers. But if you look at the actual crime statistics, you'll find that there's been a drop in violence overall, in violent crimes overall, and in rape in particular, since the advent of porn, violent movies, and video games. Wow. Maybe because if you're doing these things, if you're watching or playing with these things, and getting whatever release you have there, you may not have time to be out on the streets looking for somebody to kill. Anybody that would intentionally kill another person is probably not the most mentally balanced creature ever to begin with. And if you're having to kill somebody that's trying to kill you, then you're under duress. So that's kind of a thing. Okay. Yes, playing as a medieval knight is fun, however accurate it may not be. But no, you probably wouldn't want to live this one. That was just icky. Because you're actually going to spend the first few years in training and mucking out your knight's armor. That's a large part of it. Because you couldn't exactly get that shed off in order to go for the shedder. So, okay. Anyway, I think that's us then.
Yeah, Main Gun asked how many teenagers are gamers as compared to teenage gamers that go on shooting sprees.
I don't know, millions to one, probably.
Yep.
I mean, you'd have to look at how many people 14 to 19 or 14 to 21 go on shooting sprees that are gamers, as opposed to the total number of people that are gamers in that area, in that age range. I don't actually have those numbers handy, and it's something that might actually be worth looking at before the next part goes up on Monday. I would love to know just how many people there are, how many people, not just necessarily boys, but boys and girls both, between the ages of 14 and 21. That go on shooting rampages as opposed to the general number. Even if you say that's actually not a fair representation, because we've only actually got media reports of men doing shootings, then you could still look at the number of male gamers in that age range versus the number of school shootings that have gone on, or even shooting sprees in general that have gone on by gamers over that period of time and look into the causes of those cases, because I'm pretty sure there are a few enough that you'd actually be able to dig into the case histories. 5 out of yeah, he wants the mini Kage is definitely on a roll today. Here you go. Yes, I promise the mean lady isn't going to be on the screen anymore for a little while. Here you go. Come on, Albert. No, you just deal with what you got for right now. All right. So, if anybody else has got something going on, yeah, Main Gun says 5 out of 4 gamers are homicidal maniacs. Well, you know what? That depends. Are we talking in-game or out-of-game? In-game, we're probably all homicidal maniacs.
In-game, yes, but I don't think that
there are
in
people out
real
there
life.
who have effectively committed complete genocide.
In real life, in real life, it does not compute.
In Call of Duty games. There was actually a statistic there was actually a number a few years ago that horrified a bunch of people, and that there were some 2 billion people over the course of one of the Call of Duty games. I think it was one of the Modern Warfare games. 2 billion people had been killed in a single year. That's 2 billion deaths across all the servers, globally, had been killed in one of the Call of Duty Modern Warfare games, and it was like, okay. You know, there are a few people out there that have got a few 100,000 kills to, maybe a comparative handful of deaths. Those people were probably playing them from the beginning and take no issue with it. And they're probably productive members of society or major league gamers, one or the other. Okay, doing something like that, it's a nonsense statistic. Yes, 2 billion avatars died on battlefields over the course of a year. I would be shocked if that number wasn't actually a lot higher now, since video games have gotten more popular. Especially shooters, as you start seeing the previous generation, they started seeing the generation that watched their parents playing these games now growing up and playing them themselves. Especially with an average household size planet-wide of about 2.5. So most everybody at this point is a gamer on some level or another. The people that don't play these games play some other sort of game. And some people play games with the financial stability of the planet. Those poor unfortunate electrons. That's really what you're doing. You're kicking the crap out of a bunch of electrons. I mean, really, those electrons don't mind. They're going to keep going regardless of what you do to them. Okay. So, Anita not only trashed her own point and called it absurd, we've managed to make it even more absurd. So, anyway, that's us then.
Okay. Thank you for watching.
Yes, thank you for watching. If you want to see more content like this, you want to see some better and some different content, you're freely welcome to support the channel. There are links below. There are all kinds of things that we need right now, and the sooner we can get some of those things, the better. All right. In the meantime, stay sane, stay safe, and let's make games fun again.